Hi everyone, I am Janeline Luares from STEM 11A2, an alpha student of course in Our Lady of Fatima University, Quezon City campus. And first of all, welcome to my very first video here in YouTube. And I am here today for a given test to do a vlog tutorial. And I chose to discuss the hypothesis testing for proportion. So now, let's get into the video. As I said, I will be discussing today the hypothesis testing for proportion. It is used to determine if the sample proportion is significantly different from a specific population proportion. This is also called the p-test. So, before we move on to the procedures, basahin muna natin itong definition of terms at tandaan yung mga denotations. So, first, the significance level. This is the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. Critical region, the region of values that correspond to the rejection of the null hypothesis at some chosen probability level. So, ito yung mga denotations natin. Tandaan natin, capital letter P for proportion, alpha for significance level, P with subscript 0, hypothesize population proportion, P hat for sample proportion, N for sample size, and X for sample with reply. So, meron tayong two types of hypothesis testing. First, we have one-tailed test. This is a statistical hypothesis test in which the value for which we can reject the null hypothesis and are entirely in one-tailed of probability distribution. So, meron tayong dalawang klase ng one-tailed test. First is the left-tailed test. Left-tailed test if the sample proportion is significantly lower than the hypothesized population. So, makikita nyo kung pag left-tailed test, nasa kaliwa yung shade niya. So, nasa kaliwang buntot siya ng probability distribution. Pag sinabi namang right-tailed test, it is if the sample proportion is significantly higher than the hypothesized proportion. So, pag sinabing left-tailed, less than or lower. Pag sinabing right-tailed, upper, higher, or greater. So, from the word itself na makikita nyo, pag left-tailed test, syempre nasa kaliwa, nasa left, yung buntot na may shade. Right-tailed test naman, kapag nasa kanan, yung buntot na may shade. So, ang pangalawa is yung two-tailed test. Pag two-tailed test naman, tulad na nakikita nyo, dalawang buntot niya yung may shade. So, two-tailed test will reject the null hypothesis if the sample proportion is significantly higher or lower than the hypothesized proportion. So, ayan yung probability distribution natin. Ayan, nakita yung may shade na yan. Ayan yung critical region or yung rejection region. Kapag nag-lay dyan, yung masosolve natin, ibig sabihin, kailangan nating i-reject yung claim. Kapag nandito naman siya sa may gitna, tinatawag natin itong mga unshaded area, tinatawag natin itong FTR or failed to reject region. Kapag dito nag-lay yung mga na-solve natin, then kailangan nating i-accept yung claim. So, itong mga shaded area, yan yung tinatawag nating critical region. And ito naman yung unshaded area, FTR or the failed to reject region. So, nandito na tayo sa part kung saan discuss natin ang step by step kung paano isosolve ang hypothesis testing. So, the first step, check the necessary assumption and state the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Step 2, select the level of significance, solve the p-hat, and find the critical value using ctable. So, z-test lang yung gagamitin natin dito. Step 3, calculate the test statistics, which is the z-test. Step 4, decision. Dito yung mag-decide tayo if i-reject natin or i-accept natin yung null hypothesis. So, conclusion. Describe the result and the statistical conclusion in understandable way. So, syempre, para mas maintindihan nyo, isa-isa natin yung i-discuss. So, first, the step 1, check necessary assumption and state the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So, sa given problem, makikita natin doon, hahanapin natin yung null hypothesis and yung alternative hypothesis. Then, titingnan natin kung saan dito yon. So, malalaman niyo yung mamaya. Dito tayo magbabasa sa alternative hypothesis kung anong tailed test yung gagamitin natin. So, for example, yung null hypothesis natin is equal, tapos yung alternative hypothesis natin is not equal. So, it means ang gagamitin nating tailed test is yung two-tailed test. Kapag naman equal or less than yung null hypothesis, as yung alternative hypothesis natin is greater than, so from the word greater than, right-tailed test. So yung alternative hypothesis natin kapag naman less than, left-tailed test. So tandaan natin yan. So the second step, select the level of significance, solve the p-hat, and find the critical value using ctable. So, yung significance level natin is nakadepende na dun sa instruction sa problem or always given na siya. So, it can be given in a form of decimal, percentage, and also can be given in a form of confidence level. So, pwede siyang ibigay sa given ng tatlong klase. So, first is yung significance level na naka-decimal na, like this. So, kapag nakaganito na yung significance level nyo, okay na yan. Ayan na mismo yung kukunin yung significance level. Pero kapag ang significance level is naka-percentage, like this, for example, at significance level 5%, i-convert nyo lang siya into decimal. So, mag-move lang tayo ng decimal from right to left. So, yung 5% na natin magiging 0.05. Iko-convert lang natin siya. Kapag naman confidence level yung binigay, kailangan yung i-convert yung confidence level into significance level. So, for example, at 95% of level of significance. So, since confidence level siya, i-convert muna natin siya into significance level. So, yung 95, halimbawa 95%, ima-minus natin siya sa 100%. So, like, 100 minus 95%, 100% minus 95% is equal to 5%. So, kung 5% yan, ayan na yung significance level natin, kailangan mo ulit siyang i-convert into decimal. So, yung 5% natin, i-convert natin into decimal. Mag-move tayo ng point dito, pakaliwa, 1, 2. So, we have 0.05. So, ganyan lang kung paano convert ng confidence level to significance level. So, the next step, step 2 pa rin tayo. After we select the level of significance, syempre, let's solve the p-hat. So, p-hat is equal to the sample with reply or respond divided by the sample size. So, for example, sa problem, we surveyed 100 teenagers and 54 teenagers responded. So, yung mga nag-respond, which is 54, i-divide natin siya sa kabuoang teenager na sinurvey natin, 100. So, i-divide lang natin yon, and in decimal form, yun yung p-hat natin. So, after natin malaman yung p-hat, hahanapin naman natin yung critical value using the table. So, makikita natin dito, itong may mga shaded na blue, ayan lang yung yung mga critical value na gagamitin natin sa z-table. So, nakikita natin dito sa taas, itong mga 0 point, ganyan-ganyan na yan, ayan yung significance level. Dito natin gagamitin yung significance level, kaya dapat naka-decimal point, kasi puro to naka-decimal. So, walang naka-percent dyan. So, aalamin muna natin kung one-tailed test ba yan or two-tailed test. Kasi kailangan nating malaman yan. Kasi tingnan nyo, itong 0.05 na nandito sa one-tailed test, nandito siya banda, diba? Kapag two-tailed test naman, nandito yung 0.05 niya. So, paano kayo makakasiguro kung tama yung makukuha yung critical value? Siyempre, dapat tama muna yung type ng tailed test na gagamitin nyo. One-tailed ba yan or two-tailed pa yan? Pag sinabing left-tailed, dito kayo sa one-tailed. Pag sinabing right-tailed, dito rin kayo sa one-tailed, titingin ng significance level. Then, yung katapat niya ay yun yung critical value na kukunin natin. So, step 3, dito tayo sa calculation. So, z is equal to p hat, that in decimal form yan, p hat minus p sub 0 divided by the square root of p sub 0 multiplied by the difference of 1 and p sub 0 divided by the sample size. So, pag nagsosolve na tayo, makikita natin yan. Madali lang yan kapag i-input na natin sa calculator. So, step 4, decision making. Dito natin i-reject or i-accept yung null hypothesis. So, ito yung rules niya. May rules siya. Kapag two-tailed test yung ginamit natin, syempre, if C is less than or greater than the critical value, then reject the null hypothesis. Yung Z na yan, ayan yung nasolve natin dito. Kung ano yung nasolve natin dito, kung greater than or less than ba siya sa critical value, then i-reject natin. Pero kung hindi siya less than and greater than sa critical value na nakuha natin, then kailangan nating i-accept yung null hypothesis. Kapag one-tailed test naman, una is yung left-tailed test, from the word left, sinabi ko na sa inyo kanina, less than. So, tandaan nyo lang, pag left, lower, kapag right, greater or higher. So, left-tailed test, if Z is less than the critical value, then reject the null hypothesis. And the right-tailed test, if C is greater than the critical value, then reject the null hypothesis. Maiintindihan nyo rin yan kapag nagsosolve na tayo. So, i-guide ko naman kayo. Step by step pa rin. Next is the last step, the conclusion. So, here, describe the result and the statistical conclusion in understandable way. For example, ito. There is a significant relationship between the battery of the car and getting better gas mileage. So, ang conclusion natin, at alpha is equal to 0.05, itong alpha, 0.05, ayan yung significance level natin. So, kailangan pa rin nating ilagay dyan yung significance level natin. So, at alpha is equal to 0.05, the battery of a car has a significance relationship to the car's mileage. So, let's try an example. So our first example, Zaven believes that 75% of the newlyweds in the Philippines doesn't have their own house yet and are still living under their parents. So he performed a hypothesis test to determine if the percentage is correct. So Zaven sampled 100 newlyweds and 54 responded that they doesn't have their own house yet and are still living at their parents. So thus the assumption proportion of Zaven is correct with 1% level of significance. So the first step, check the necessary assumption. So P is equal to 75% or 0.75. At kukontrahin natin siya dito sa alternative hypothesis. So, since yung null hypothesis is equal, ang alternative natin is not equal. So, 75% or 0.75. I-decimal point na natin siya kasi dito sa mga given, ang kailangan natin hindi naka-percentage. Dapat lahat in decimal or whole numbers. So, by this sign, natatandaan natin, ang type na to is, ang type ng hypothesis testing dito is two-tailed test. And then yung given na significance level is 1%. So, kailangan natin siya i-convert into decimal. So, paano? Yung point niya dito ay move natin to the left. So, ang magiging sagot is 0.01. So, tulad nga nasabi natin sa una, kapag ang significance level natin ay naka-percent form, naka-percentage, kailangan natin siyang i-convert into decimal. So, from 1%, meron tayong significance level na 0.01. So, yung given natin, P sub 0, ito yan, 0.75. Yung N, ilan yung sinurvey niya, yung population nun, 100, at ilan yung nag-respond. So, 54, yung sampled with respond or reply. So, after nyan, kailangan natin isolve yung P hat. So, P hat is equal to sample with reply divided by sample size. So, here, 54 divided by 100, that will be 0.54. At dito, para mahanap natin ng critical value, z-test lang ang gagamitin natin. So, ang significance level natin na 0.01. So, nandito siya. Dito natin siya titignan sa pangalawang row, sa may two-tailed. So, hanapin natin yung 0.01 ito. 0.01, ang katapat niya ay 2.576. And since two-tailed yan, dalawa ang kukunin natin, pati yung negative niya. So, ayan. 2.576. So, next step, kailangan na natin siyang i-calculate na natin to. So, P hat, which is 0.54, minus 0.75, divided by the square root of 0.75, multiplied by the difference of 1 and 0.75, divided by the sample size, which is 100. So, i-input natin siya sa calcu. So we have negative 8,497. So ayan yung na-solve nating Z. So next, magde-decide na tayo. Since two-tailed yan, reject the null hypothesis if C is greater than 2.576 or Z is less than negative 2.576. So, itong negative 4.8497, mas malaki ba siya dito sa 2.576? No. Hindi yan. So, mas malaki ba? Ay, mas maliit ba siya dito sa negative 2.576? Yes. So, since Z is less than negative 2.576, then we reject the null hypothesis. So, ang conclusion natin, since na-reject natin siya, at alpha is equal to 0.01, yung significance level niya, the newly weds that doesn't have their own house and are still living under their parents is not equal to 75%. So, not equal. Nireject natin yung null hypothesis niya na yung P daw is equal to 75%. Na-reject natin yan. So, ito yung gagamitin natin. Ito yung lumabas na tama. So, at alpha is equal to 0.01, the newlyweds that doesn't have their own house yet and are still living under their parents is not equal to 75%. So, nire-check natin yung claim. Now, let's take a look. Pangit kasi yung sulat ko kanina, so dito tayo. So, ayan, two-tailed test yung ginamit natin. So, itong hypothesis, null hypothesis is equal to 75% and yung alternative is not equal to 75%. So, ito yung mga given, yung alpha, yung critical value. Kapag sinabi nating two-tailed test, kapag two-tailed test yung ginamit natin, dalawa yung kukunin natin, yung negative and yung positive value. Then, ito yung step 3. Then, kinalagyan natin siya. Ito yung lumabas. So, mag-decide na tayo. So, reject the null hypothesis if Z, ito yung Z natin, if Z is greater than 2.576 or Z is less than negative 2.576. So, since Z natin is equal to negative 4.8497 and it is less than negative 2.576, we reject the null hypothesis. So, ito yung malinaw nating conclusion. So, conclusion natin at 0.01, the newlyweds that doesn't have their own house yet and are still living under their parents is not equal to 75%. So, ganyan tayo mag-test for proportion. So, ang mga susunod na example, pwede nyo ring itry. So, just pause the video. And, ito yung second example natin. So, pause the video. Try to solve. And after you solve, check your answers here. For the second example, we have Sue and Haru are arguing about their teachers in their school. Zoe claims that 28% or more is the right percentage of the teachers who doesn't have any child in their school. But Haru thinks differently. He thinks that it is less than what Sue is claiming. So he conducted a survey in their school for their teachers. He asked 250 teachers to be his respondents, and 79 teachers responded that they doesn't have any child. For this test, he uses 95% of confidence level. Does the claim of Suez accepted? So, ang null hypothesis natin is P is greater than or equal 28% or 2.28. And kokontrahin naman natin siya, which is yung ni Haru. P is less than 28% or 0.28. Ang basis sign ng alternative hypothesis, anong tailed test ang gagamitin natin? Since less than siya, left tailed test ang gagamitin natin. So, yung significance level, since ang given dito is yung confidence level, tulad ng sabi ko kanina, isusubtract natin siya sa 100%, then yung sagot, i-convert natin into decimal. So, ang given is 95%. So, 100% minus 95%, that will be 5%. So, 5%, i-convert natin siya into decimal. So, we have 0.05. So, ito natin yung given, 0.28, 250 teachers, and 79 yung nag-respond. So, isolve din natin yung p hat, which is 79 divided by 250. We have 0.32. So, hahanapin na natin ng critical value using z-test or z-table. So, titingin tayo doon sa unang row kasi one-tailed tayo left. So, ito, 0.05. And then, tumapat siya sa negative 1.645. So, paano siya naging negative? Puro positive lang naman yung nasa C-table natin. Since left-tailed test siya, negative ang gagamitin natin. So, tandaan nyo to ha. Kapag two-tailed test ang gamit natin, two-tailed test, positive and negative ang gagamitin natin, katulad ng kanina. Two-tailed test yung naunang example, kaya ang nilagay natin ng critical value is negative and positive. So, kapag left-tailed naman, from the word left, natandaan natin na less than, so, negative ang gagamitin natin. Kapag naman right-tailed yan, ang gagamitin natin ang right-tailed test, ang magiging sign niya dito is greater than, so, ang gagamitin natin ng critical value is positive. So, ganun lang yon. So, since left-tailed test to, less than ang sign na sa alternative hypothesis natin, so, negative sign yung gagamitin natin sa critical value. So, now, let's move on to the step 3. So, P half 0.32 minus 0.28 divided by the square root of 0.28 multiplied by the difference of 1 and 0.28 divided by the sample size, which is 250. So, i-input lang natin siya sa calcu. So, ang z natin is 1.4086. So, naka-round off na siya. Ni-round off na natin siya. 4 decimal places lang ang gagamitin natin. So, magde-decide na tayo. If i-accept natin or i-reject natin yung null hypothesis. So, reject the null hypothesis if z is less than negative 1.645. So, mas mababa ba itong nakuha natin, itong z, mas mababa ba siya sa negative 1.645? So, hindi. Since hindi naman siya less than negative 1.65, then, i-accept natin siya. I-accept natin yung null hypothesis natin. So, ang conclusion, doon natin tignan sa PowerPoint. Mas maayos na siya dito. So, isa-isahin ulit natin. Ang null hypothesis niya is P is greater than or equal 28% or 0.28. Then, yung alternative hypothesis niya, kukontrahin lang siya. P is less than 28% or 0.28. Then, yung significance level, na-convert na natin siya. So, 0.05. Ang given natin na P sub 0, which is 0.28, N is equal to 250, X is equal to 79. Then, isolve natin yung P hat, which is 79 divided by 250 is equal to 0.32. So, ganun ulit yung critical value. Negative siya since left-tailed test yung ginamit natin. Negative 1.645. And step 3, 0.32 minus 0.28 divided by the square root of 0.28 multiplied by the difference of 1 and 0.28 divided by 250. So, we have 1.4086. So, naka-round off na siya. So, reject the null hypothesis if C is less than 645. So, since Z is equal to 1.4086 and it is greater than negative 1.645, then we accept the null hypothesis. So, the conclusion, at alpha is equal to 0.05, the percentage of the teacher in their school is 28% and more. So, tama yung claim ni Zoe, kaya natin in-accept yung null hypothesis. So, and let's try for the last time. Yung pangatlong example, you can pause the video to solve on your own and check later. So, for the last example, a concerned citizen claimed that the proportion of teenagers in Quezon City who owns more than one gadget is 67% or less. But the gadget manufacturers believe that the proportion is actually higher than that. To determine the correct proportion, they surveyed 300 teenagers and 246 responded, saying that they own more than one gadget at 0.10 level of significance. So, ang claim natin, ang null hypothesis natin is P is less than or equal 67% or 0.67. So, kukontrahin lang natin siya since less than to, then greater than 67% or 0.67. So, ang significance level natin dito, since naka-decimal point na siya, yun na yun, 0.10. Hindi na natin kailangan i-convert or i-subtract pa sa 100. Since significance level na siya at naka-decimal form na siya. So, given P sub 0 is 0.67, N is 300, and X, which is yung nag-respond, is 246. So, solve natin yung P hat. X is divided by N. So, 246 divided by 300. That is 0.82. So, now, itong yung type ng tail test niya, since greater than to, then write tail test. So, yan. So, ang critical value natin, titignan natin siya sa unang row, dun sa one-tailed, since right-tailed siya. So, hanapin natin 0.10. So, we have here. Ang katapat niya, nakatapat siya sa 1.282. So, positive yung gagamitin natin since right-tailed siya. So, now, let's proceed to step 3. P hat 0.82 minus 0.67 divided by the square root of 0.67 minus 1 minus 0.67 divided by 300. So, our answer is, input muna natin siya sa calcu. So, we have 5.5253. So, decision na tayo. So, reject the null hypothesis if Z is greater than 1.282. So, yung 5.5253 ba natin ay mas malaki, is greater than 1.282. So, since oo, then we reject the null hypothesis. So, let's go back sa PPT para mas malinaw. So, right-tailed test ang ginamit natin. Ang null hypothesis, P is less than or equal 67% or 0.67. And kukontrahin natin siya sa alternative hypothesis, P is greater than 67% or 0.67. Then, yung mga given, significance levels equal to 0.10. Yung given na P sub 0, 0.67. N is equal to 300. X is equal to 246. So, solve the P hat. 246 divided by 300 is equal to 0.82. So, ang critical value natin, ang nakuha natin ay 1.282. So, positive ang ginamit natin kasi right-tailed test yung ginamit natin na tail test. So, step 3, solve na natin. 0.82 minus 0.67 divided by the square root of 0.67 multiplied by the difference of 1 minus 0.67 and then divided by 300. So, we calculate 5.5253. So, step 4, reject the null hypothesis if C is greater than 1.82. So, since ang Z natin is 5.5253 and it is greater than 1.282, we reject the null hypothesis. So, ang conclusion natin, at alpha is equal to 0.10, the teenagers who owns more than one gadgets is higher or greater than 67%. So that's all for today's video, and I hope you learned something from this. And if you know someone who are struggling or have difficulties solving PTES, let's share this video. So again, I am Chanelin Luares from STEM 11A2, leaving this mathematical quote for you. So mathematics is not about numbers, equations, or computations or algorithms. It's about understanding. And it is from William Paul Thurston. Again, thank you for watching this video. Bye-bye!